Tell me a little bit more about that potential for the employment of the locums. You just mentioned it briefly.
Yeah, I didn't mean to derail them.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that we work on, and Liz is an example of what Tim was saying earlier, works in our risk management. So if you are a NALTO member and you're in the audience, and if you're one of the HCO partners, you should be working with the NALTO firm. But Liz, for example, gathers data from all of our members and tries to make it so when there's a privileging issue that we work together. Like, I'm sure there was a time 15 years ago that you'd get that request for like employment verification or verification of dates. You'd be like, LT.com, I'm not giving them anything. You know what I mean? But I think those days are over, and I'm confident in saying that. That said, efforts like what Liz is doing and on our legislative committee and team, and what Tim was alluding to earlier, is we're lobbying on behalf of the industry as a whole to make sure that locum tenens, for the reasons Chris just talked about, will maintain permanently and be permanently codified as 1099s moving forward. If, as an example, in the PRO Act that did not go all the way through, and we could certainly, I think this is the 4 o'clock session about Uber and Lyft and Instacart, so we'll be hosting that later. Kidding. But in California's quest to protect these folks, they created a carve-out for physicians and surgeons, yay, California. But they did not for MPs, PAs, and CRNAs. So effectively what happened was a lot of staffing and individual providers that operate as 1099s removed themselves from that state. So you can imagine the dumpster fire of the shortage already in California, and rather than getting a fire extinguisher, you just threw a bucket of gasoline on it. So we use that as an example, California, of what to do in terms of creating that carve-out, and also what not to do in this other staffing vertical per se. I know majority of NALTO members do MPs, PAs, and CRNAs. So, and again, without, derailing the conversation too much, but we've been, I think, fairly successful and had a bill introduced through Buddy Carter of Georgia. That is HR 7881, which is the Healthcare Provider Minimization Act. And if, hopefully, knock on, I don't have any wood up here, but as we move forward in the process and try to get co-sponsors to remove that friction that Tim alluded to earlier and ensure that these folks can travel throughout the country and provide the coverage that the patients really need. Because at the end of the day, we need to connect this with the why, right? I mean, if I had a magic wand and could wave this all away, I'd find another way to earn a living. I think we all probably could. But we know what the problem exists. We know we're part of the solution. And bless you. Bless you. But at the end of the day, it's important to us as NALTO and as an industry that we get that done. As a side note, if you guys do want to reach out to me about that specifically, we need all the support that we can get. So I'm happy to expand on that later on, or later on in this conversation.
Well, and if something like the PRO Act, and that came, and there weren't the carve-outs, right, in California, so somebody smart said, ooh, if you do that, right, here's the impact.
Yeah,
intubation lives for physicians, right?
We discussed this morning a little bit. So the bottom line is this. We don't know what the percentage of locum tenens providers that would take themselves out of the labor pool if they were forced to be employed. This won't be shock to anybody probably in the audience. They don't want to be employed by us. We know that, okay? They don't, Uber and Lyft drivers may need protection. Again, that's another session for another time. But the reality is, let's just say conservative estimates, 40 to 50% probably couldn't do it due to the ties to their current employer. So if you take the estimated 55,000 physicians alone, this does not include MPs, PAs, and CRNAs, and you take half of those people out of the labor pool, you have a much bigger problem than you just had. So luckily, again, not for the other reasons, the PRO Act did not move forward, but we need to change from a reactive stance to a proactive one. So the involvement of all these lovely companies up here in our collaborative efforts, we're looking to stabilize that, get it permanently codified, and take that off the table. And then we can spend more time and energy worrying about this. And I'll get off my soapbox.
It's worth saying, too, that if you're in a healthcare organization here and you don't know as much about this, you should come and talk to Matt. Because I think, Christy, you were talking about it, you were telling your leadership about the need to do this. And as an agency community, we can do a lot together. But ultimately, this impacts the care at the sites that you all are trying to staff. And so the more you know and can help make this happen, the more we kind of succeed together again.
It's a great point.
I think a lot of the lobbying efforts that NALTO is doing is on the federal level, but we're starting to see issues on the state level as well.
You talk about Missouri? You want to talk about Missouri at all?
I'm not sure we want to talk about
Okay.
it. But, I mean, that's what I was referring to is,
Yeah.
I mean, we have states passing laws that I don't think they fully understand the impact that it's going to make in their state. And some of these states are rural states, to your point, that don't have a lot of options. And I think it's a lack of education. We have to do a better job educating people on what we do. So there's a federal issue, but there's starting to be a state issue as well.
So to just piggyback Tim's for 2 sentences, he's right, because we probably spend about 5 to 6 hours a week talking to members of Congress, trying to get co-sponsors for the bill that's already on the table. And when you talk to staffers, and we've been lucky enough to actually talk to the members. The first time it happened, I gotta be honest, it was a little bit weird, right? They sit down and it's like the person you just saw on CNBC, like Joe Manchin's right in front of you, and then but you explain it to them, and it's like they've never considered it. They're considering the help that Locum Tenens gives the VA, rural areas, Indian Health, but they've never really thought about it. And then you kind of see the light turn on,
Right.
And then you try to paint a picture of what it would be like without them. Not that you want to be doomsday, but the reality is, and he's 100% correct.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about this morning, was if you put a number on, so from my side, right, how many lives served are not served, right, without your providers in that model, 50%-ish, you said.
Yeah.
But then also, for your side, quantify that by the dollars when you think from a revenue aspect. I mean, the patient lives are what we're in it for, but your businesses do need to still make money, right? It would be huge impact on all sides. Yeah, and to Tim's point, just the patients are the ones that are affected here.
Well, some of these states are, I mean, if they go through with what they're talking, and a lot of times when we talk to our healthcare partners, they don't even know. They don't know that these laws are even being considered. And so again, that's where we're going to have to educate them on what that means, not only for us, but for them. But, I mean, they're not the states that you would think would be passing laws like that.
Do you think there's any opportunity to make the connection either through NAUTO or other organizations with the state hospital associations? Is there some impact there?
Yeah, so we're working on that. So the best way to try to get something like this passed is to create a coalition, right? So, because at the end of the day, a lot of times we're walking into these virtual or the actual offices. We have our visit to DC next week, and a lot of NAUTO member companies will be represented, including those on the stage. So when we walk in, do we look like just a group of staffing agencies who have a business interest in mind? It's certainly true. Now we connect it to the why, and we have the data to back that up. However, what would really be impactful, and we're talking to people at the DoD, at the VA, and also our partners, our clients. And I know sometimes it can be a little bit of a large ask to say, hey, here's a letter explaining what locum tenens is, how it helps your area. Would you be willing just to say that you would sign on this is a good idea to maintain this labor pool? So I would ask the hospital systems that are in attendance if you'd be willing to do that. I'm happy to engage in any one of us, really, but happy to engage in that conversation, because I think that would move this along a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. And again, it takes one, gigantic potential issue being proactive off the table. And then we can concentrate, and there's other things too. The licensing compact was brought up. Mm-hmm. The removal of some privileging and credentialing has been brought up by some congressional offices. Now again, you gotta eat an elephant one bite at a time, as they say. So we gotta get, before you fly, you gotta learn how to, crawl and walk. So that's what we're doing, and we're doing it one step at a time.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is a knee-jerk reaction to specifically nursing bill rates. Yeah. And politicians are getting involved because it was getting a lot of interest, and we're getting kind of pulled into some of that. Sure. And it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think what we've talked about, nursing bill rates, you've all experienced in the hospital systems, but 300% inflated, right? And the rate is just crazy. And I think we've agreed it's plateauing, and you're seeing that if you have RN staffing networks and things. But it's plateauing now, and we're seeing that if we had an employed person who took a travel job, and now they're coming back, because guess what? Their family still lives there, but their rate, right? Where will we land after we did a 300%? Yeah. Wage increase, where will we land? I think we talked about on the locum side, though, it was a much smaller number, and it wasn't a price gouge, in my opinion, that I felt like travel nursing took for the
Our
industry.
AMN and cross-country friends in the room would know much better than us because we're a small player in the nursing space. However, the nursing march is on the way down. The prices are coming down. That is good for everyone, including the nurse. That is helpful for healthcare. It doesn't mean there hasn't been a permanent dislocation in the nursing market. I believe there has been a permanent dislocation, and it will be permanently higher priced. And that is something we're going to all have to come to grips with, because what we see is that bleeds over to all other parts of a healthcare operation. And what we all need to do is make sure it doesn't, right? There's a unique way we have to help our clients be better at staffing consultation, I'll call it. I appreciate working with the Locumsmart team and watching them do that over the years. They've made good practice there. And I think all of us have to do that, because that nursing thing is, although it's coming down, it is not going back.
No, absolutely.
And if we think it is, we're kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think if we don't plan that it's going to be a 35-40% higher price marketplace than it was before, then
Yeah, it's like
Not
doing like a
being
commission
prudent.
raise and then trying to take it back.
Right.
yeah.